Welcome back to Wiz Learning, and what we're doing today? Well, today we're learning how to refinish cabinets, and I'm going to show you how you can take these wood cabinets and paint them white, either with a sprayer, or I'm going to show you how you can paint them kitchen cabinets without a sprayer. And either one comes out pretty good. The sprayer's probably obviously better, but if you don't have a sprayer, don't worry. I mean, they've been making and painting cabinets since the time of George Washington, and last time I checked, dinosaurs weren't even discovered when George Washington died, and neither were airless sprayers. So they've been making cabinets and painting them for a long time, and so you can paint them too without an air sprayer. So all you really need is kind of a 5-step process. The first step is you're going to want to tape off your walls so you don't get semi-gloss enamel paint on them. You're going to tape off any of your counter spots, basically anywhere on the floor, anywhere you don't want to get paint, so that you can get right up to the edge of your cabinets and make it look nice. So the first step is just really prep. The second step is sanding. You can either use 220 grit sandpaper, you can use fine steel wool to get in the cracks, and you can use a sanding block. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the fronts off, and then I'm going to expose the body of the cabinet to sand it. So I'll sand them in different stages. I'm going to sand the fronts. I'll take off all the drawers and all the doors, and I'll actually sand those. I'll do this with a palm sander. It just goes a lot faster, and then I'll get in the cracks with the sponge. But all you're really doing is looking to rough up the wood. So that's the second process. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to take this lacquer thinner. You can get it at any paint store, Lowe's, Home Depot, and you're going to just simply wipe down the cabinets. Before you do the lacquer, I'm going to go over them, blow them off, and I'm going to also go over them with tack cloth to pick up any loose dust, and then I'm going to go over them with lacquer so it'll pick up any polyurethane. So when you're sanding and doing the lacquer, really all you're looking at doing is roughing up and removing this polyurethane coating is mostly what you're trying to accomplish. You don't have to necessarily get all of the stain off of it. Some people will come in with Bondo and they'll try to get this wood grain out. So they'll put Bondo all over it. We're not gonna do that. We don't mind a little bit of wide grain of the wood grain kind of bleeding through, so we're gonna go with it. Next phase is we're gonna come in and we're going to use Sherwin-Williams Extreme Bond Primer, and you can roll it on with one of the little foam rollers, or you can just brush it on. We'll probably roll it on mostly with the little foam rollers, and then these corners here, little crevices, we'll use a brush. We'll brush that in, and then if you're worried about brush streaks, you can take one of these little nappy rollers and roll it up and down. It's dry, so you're gonna need a bunch of them, but you literally just roll up and down one time to kind of give it that splatter look. And that's how we're gonna spray ours, but that's how you can get by without spraying. It's a technique I'll show you that I've used on bathrooms, I've used it on some utility rooms, and it really makes it look, gives it a sprayed look. The last step is painting, and it's going to get 2 coats. So everything's going to get a coat of primer, and it's going to get 2 coats. And we're using this Emerald semi-gloss enamel trim paint from Sherwin-Williams. And it's the highest one they've got. There's the Pro Classic, which most people used previously. And we're going to spray this on. But what you can do is you can actually paint it on with a brush, and it's kind of self-leveling, so you want to make sure your fronts and your doors are laying flat. And then after you brush them or paint them and get it on there, you're going to real quickly come back with these dry, kind of like carpet brushes almost, and you're simply going to go up and back, and it'll give it that sprayed look. So if you don't have a sprayer, this is what you're going to need. You're going to need a lot of these, and then you can wash them when you're done. After you've done it once, wash them all out, let them dry, and then you can just reuse them over and over again. If you need to clean them faster, after you've washed them thoroughly, you can throw them in your dryer and dry them really quick. But this is a game changer here for you.
So the process is exactly the same, whether you want to do a railing, you want to do a mantle on a fireplace, you want to do a cap trim railing, maybe in a basement or upstairs, or you want to do bathroom cabinets. You don't need a sprayer. You can simply brush it on and then come back with a little carpet roller, and it'll look exactly like you sprayed it and look wonderful.
All right, so here we're just taking some basic commercial degreaser, and you're just gonna wanna spray all your fronts down and your backs. And you're just gonna take some towels, and you're simply gonna wipe it off, get any kind of the grime in the cracks before we sand it. That way you're not sanding all the gunk into your wood, so it won't get in the grain. There's like some food stuff there, so we'll go back and get it. That's it, as you can see, not real bad, but it's just that little extra step that might make a little bit of a difference on keeping your fronts to look better, for the bond primer to stick to it better. That's it. That's a simple step, but it makes a big difference. We'll do the backs as well.
So step 2, we just were really taking off all the hardware, the hinges, both off the body of the cabinets and off of the doors and the pull-out drawers. We actually separate them so we could paint them easier. We went ahead and put new hinges on. If you're going to use the existing ones, you'd want to label those and put them in a baggie and keep them with the door and drawer so that they just go back on easier in the original holes. Step 3, you're going to sponge sand or use steel wool, and you're going to hand sand or use a speed sander on the cabinets and on the doors, the fronts and the backs. You're just really trying to rough up the polyurethane to make sure that you're going to get a good stick, and then you're going to come back in with tack cloth, and simply, you can also use an air compressor to blow off all the dust, and then use tack cloth to make sure you get all the little fine particles so it doesn't get in your primer or paint. That's really about it. That's a pretty simple process. Like I said, don't go crazy with it. Just get it enough to rough up the polyurethane and get ready for the next step. All right, step 4, you're just simply going to tape off the cabinets. I prefer the frog tape, the green tape versus the blue tape, but it's just personal preference. You just want to make sure you get inside the cabinets so that when you're painting that little lip inside there, you've got both up and down covered. You're going to want to go against any place on the walls where you don't want the cabinet paint to be. If you're going to repaint the walls after you paint the cabinets, then probably not that big a deal. But we'd already painted the walls, so we were getting ready to paint the cabinets, so we went ahead and taped off the walls around where we didn't want the cabinet paint to get up on the walls. And that's it. Like I said, then you don't want to leave it on there forever, and you don't want to get a ton of paint on the actual tape, but it's just there as a precautionary measure. We tape the appliances too rather than remove them, and just kind of painted around them.
Okay, so we're almost done with the prep work. We have taped everything off. We've sanded with 220 sandpaper, speed sander on the straight parts, block sander on the crown and in the center here. On the kind of the vinyl, we did steel wool in circles to sand it, to kind of rough it up to make it abrasive. And now the last thing we're going to do, we also went over everything with tack cloth. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do lacquer thinner. You want to wear gloves, you want to wear eye protectant. It's pretty ventilated in here, but If not, you'll want to ventilate the room or where breathing, because you don't want to inhale this or get it in your eyes. But we're going to literally wipe everything down, and then we're ready to go. Okay, so now we're just basically painting the fronts, painting the inside with the Premier Bond Primer, and it dries pretty quick. I'm going to roll the fronts, kind of use the brush just to kind of get inside some of the little cracks, like the corners. I'll use it up on this crown molding up here so I can get inside. You just want to make sure, you know, you don't have very many brush strokes, and if you need to, you can come back and sand it. We're actually going to come and we're going to put 2 coats of primer on. Might be overkill, but it doesn't take that long. It takes maybe, this will probably take me an hour and a half to put it on the top and the bottom. Second coat will go faster because the first coat doesn't stick that well. Second coat will adhere really well, so it's a faster. It's faster because you don't have as many brush strokes. You get a lot of brush strokes when it doesn't stick, which sounds counterintuitive, but it really is, because you kind of get what you feel like is bigger streaks because it doesn't stick to certain parts, even though we've sanded it down. And if you have 2 people, it would probably go even faster, but we just have moi, so 1 it is. And if you kind of put a light coat with this on the first time, you'll get it good with the second one. So if you're going to do 2 coats, don't really worry about getting it everything coated. You can see how it's kind of bleeding through here. That's fine. The second coat will be stronger. But see how I kind of have to go over it a couple times. And I'm using a lint-free roller. You know, they make those kind of cabinet rollers, but I feel like those don't even grab at all. So I'm using these, just these pretty 1/2-inch nap is all I'm using. I got them at Lowe's, get them at Sherwin-Williams as well. You just hit the insides of the cabinets. I've got them taped off, so it should go quick where it's close to the up here. This is a little harder, so I've just been brushing it. You can come back and, like I said, roll part of it if you wanted to get up in that crack. As long as you're kind of fluid with your brush strokes and staying kind of with the grain, not trying to get it heavy, just kind of keep it smooth and light. It kind of self-levels. It dries quick. You can recoat this in, I think it was an hour at the look, but you can't be afraid to try new things. If you mess it up, you just sand it out. It's kind of like welding. If you're a bad welder, just become a good grinder until you become a better welder. So drying time on this is like crazy fast. It's anywhere from an hour to 4 hours, depending on the humidity. But I'll go ahead and let it set for 4. I'm not in that big of a hurry to do it again. I think a lot of times that's with all these projects, that's what happens. People want to try to rush everything. And like I said, don't get overwhelmed with it. If you make a mistake, you can always sand it and fix it at any point. You know, so especially since now you know the paint color, kind of know the process. You just do it again. Like if you get a drawer that gets chipped from a ring or a plate or a kid coming over, just, you know, take it off, sand it down, roll it, paint it. As long as you kind of take your time with it, you won't see the brush strokes. It'll look like it. It'll look like the rest of them. No one's going to notice. Maybe you will. No one else really will. We did Carly's house 2 years ago. She didn't put doorknobs on it. She didn't put knobs on it. So a couple of places have where you can see where the fingernails kind of dug in or chipped away at the top of the drawer, or kind of where her handles are now. We know the paint color. We're just going to redo it. Won't take any time at all. So don't panic. Same way with the new job. Just do this section. Just do this section and take, from start to finish. Yeah, you got to repeat the process. Yeah, you may make your mess again, but it's not overwhelming that way. If you have to leave your cabinet doors off for a while, big deal. Open shelving's in now, so got that going for you. Just take your time, do it right. If you have to, do it again. As we like to say in Always Learning, failure is always an option. Fail, get back up, try it again, no problem. Okay, now we're gonna do the lower, same process. You just wanna make sure you've got this taped up here. You're gonna get up tight. If there's any drawers you need to remove, just remove them, make it simple. I'm just gonna pull these two out, put them back in while it's drying, but just remove anything that's in your way just to make it as simple as possible. The other thing is you want to get yourself a good set of quality knee pads. I'm probably on a scale of 1 to 10 on the good looking scale. I'm probably a 3.5. But if you put knee pads on, I guarantee you I go at least to 4.25 all day long. So anyway, we're going to get to it. Put down a pad, get some knee pads, and just take your time and do it right. Doesn't take that long. Make sure you get the baseboard. Have somebody come behind you and look around and make sure you didn't forget anything. Didn't tape far enough.
All right, so we've put on 2 coats of primer. Now we're gonna come back and we're actually gonna sand. You can use a sponge sander. We're gonna use 220 grit sandpaper, and we're just gonna basically lightly hit any of the rough edges, just kind of get it butter smooth. And we'll come back then and wipe it down with tack cloth, just to get any dust particles that are hanging around. And then we'll come back and we'll paint it with a brush. We're going to paint the 2 coats of the enamel of the Sherwin-Williams Emerald. We're going with pure white, and we'll use this if there's any areas, like we'll come back with these dry kind of carpet brushes that they'll use for ceilings and walls, drywall, and we'll simply just go up and down, across and down, up and down, and then I may need to get a new one. I've got like 12 of these. And then we'll get a new one that's, when we do the other one, that's wet. So when it's wet, what it'll do is it'll give a splatter look that looks like you sprayed it. All right, we've sanded. Now we're just going to take a little piece of tack cloth. Looks like this. This one's actually probably still fine. And we're just going to run over it and get any little particle, little dust that's left. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's just way too many steps, you're wasting time. But, it doesn't take that much time. It took me maybe 10 minutes to just lightly hit those cabinets. And it's going to take me 5 minutes to wipe them all down before I put the paint on them. But just a chance to kind of double check to make sure you don't have any
glaring drips. You know, even if you're spraying them, you're gonna get drips, you're gonna get runs, but everything's fixable. All right, so we're ready now to put the Emerald semi-gloss on. I'm gonna brush it on. You can brush it on. This stuff is so self-leveling that you're probably not gonna see very many brush strokes. But if you wanna see no brush strokes, come back, at least on the outside, on the flat parts. Maybe you don't have to do it on the inside, but it doesn't take that long. Like I said, we're gonna brush it. We're gonna go up and down pretty quick. So we're just gonna brush this on, making sure. You wanna go, you know, you don't, it's like, you don't have to go heavy. This stuff covers really well. Get in the corners. You're gonna get all that with your brush. You can use a cabinet roller if you want to. I just prefer the brush. Like I said, now I got one other roller. Get that. You literally could paint it all because this stuff, like it dries. It's fair. It gives you a little bit of work time, and then you can recoat within 4 hours, which is what I'm trying to do today. That way I can get these inside cabinets done and stroke with the grain. That goes quick. So there's no real reason to rush. This is the same way you do your, big thing is get a good smooth bristle brush. Don't skimp on brushes. Make sure you clean it. Nobody in my family cleans them. They're all like they don't mind painting, but they just like to leave their paintbrushes out. And then they're pretty much worthless. Not the people, just the brushes. A lot of times you'll get drips in these corners, so make sure you get those kind of cleared out. That's it, and then we take this, and literally all we're gonna do is we're gonna go up and down, over. You're not gonna get much on your roller, but all this does is it gives it the same kind of splattered look you get when you spray it. Like I said, it takes not that much time. You'll need a bunch of these because this is a big project. And I'm sure some people will say you don't need them. Some people probably say it's gonna mess up more than it's good than it's gonna do, but I think you probably don't really need this on the body of the cabinets, you know, the interior like Rex that I'm doing, but I think you would want to do that on your cabinet fronts for sure if you were hand painting them, just the flat parts of them. I mean, this stuff is so good at leveling that it really eliminates a lot of the brush strokes. Like I said, just with the grain, even though this is kind of a skin, same concept. Same thing here. We're just gonna go up. Like I said, this is such a thin coat, but that's the key. You just keep it thin enough where you don't get any runs, any drips. Here's a pro tip. Get 2 brushes. When you get done, or it starts kind of getting thick, you can kind of feel it start to drag. You're gonna get brush strokes. So take a little break, wash it out in the sink. Make sure you rinse it thoroughly so it can sit there and dry. We've got a brush spinner, but then get your second brush out and get ready to go.
So it's kind of a separate step is you set up a spray station if you're going to spray, and I just set it up on an old table. Had a couple boards with some nails sticking up so that there was only 4 touch points to the board, and I used a 311 tip. The 3, the first number stands for, you kind of double that and you got about a 6-inch spray. And then 11 is just kind of how much paint's coming out of it, so you don't need a lot. You're really just kind of almost dusting it. Quick back and forth motion, just keeping the sprayer kind of moving at all times, and then come back and hit the center is all you're going to kind of do. You just kind of have to be careful you don't drip, and that the tip of the gun doesn't get clogged or anything, and then it's pretty much, it goes really quick. If you have somebody that can help you, then you can save time where you're just spraying rather than messing with the hose. If you have somewhere to hang the hose up, that helps too, in between it while you're carrying it back if you're doing it by yourself. But it took me probably 40 minutes to spray all the doors, and like I said, a lot of the time it's just going back and forth, carrying them and putting them back on the rack to dry. You're going to do the backs first, then you're going to do the fronts. We did 2 coats of primer. Like I said, we had to switch to the oil-based primer for the second coat, and then we did two coats of the Emerald semi-gloss on it, and it turned out pretty well. So we sanded in between coats of the primer, the second coat of primer and the semi-gloss, and then we sanded in between the semi-gloss second coat just to make sure there weren't, like I said, if you mess up, it's not that big a deal. You can sand it and go back, but you want to take proper ventilation, respirator, and goggles so you don't get that any of that in your eye. I mean, the worst part of this really is just the cleanup of the spraying system. But it's almost identical with the primer versus the paint. If I had the room, like I was doing a smaller job, I probably would lay it all out on the floor and put plastic below it and keep it elevated with the board, and then just spray it all on the ground. That way you're not picking up and having to move the doors. But I didn't really have enough room because I had to layer them on the sawhorses. But that'd be something you could do if you're doing a smaller run, is just put them on boards on nails off the floor and just do them all, shoot them all on the floor, and then flip them over and shoot them again. So just a tip there if you got a smaller job that you're doing.
All right, so I just got done spraying out in the garage the first coat of primer on the back side. So always start with the back side in case you mess up or there's something wrong with the gun. You're not doing any permanent damage, and it's easier to fix on the back. It's not that important because not that many people are going to see it. You have everything ready to go, so when you start on the front, it's perfect. Now, I painted the first coat already with the Emerald semi-gloss. So now I'm just going to come back with the 220. I've got the sanding block just wrapped up with 220 sandpaper, and I'm just going to lightly hit it. Knock down, look for any drips, any kind of runs, and I'm going to hit it, go over with the tack cloth, and then put on the last coat of paint, and then I'll be done. Like I said, I only have a couple hours. It's probably going to take me 3 hours, so I'll probably just do the uppers tonight, and then come back tomorrow night and do the lowers. But I'm going to sand it all, and then I'll tack cloth it, and then get as far as I can, and then I'll stop and finish it tomorrow. That's what's nice, just break it up. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't get in a hurry. Don't cut any corners. Okay, so we were talking about if you mess up, what do? Well, one, you don't panic. It's not that big a deal. What I did was I had a big run right here. See a big drip run right here. So what I did was, I was getting ready to put the last coat of paint on it. Just stopped, sanded it all the way down, made it look nice. I'm going to come back and prime it tonight, let it dry. I'm going to paint the rest of it, and then I'm going to come back in this last whole board. When I get here tomorrow night, I'm going to paint it first, and then 4 hours later, 4.5 hours, I'll lightly sand it, and I'm going to paint it for the last time, and I'm going to be done. No need to panic. You just redo that little section. If If you find any other drips, you do the same thing. If you need to, blue tape it so you don't forget it. That's it. So you can see here we've got some significant bleed through. It's hard to tell whether it's stain, probably more stain coming through. You can also get where it's a bleeding of the tannins coming through. You just see these areas here. I don't know if it's stain or if it's the tannins coming through. I don't know enough about it, but anyway, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna come in. We don't wanna have a chance. We don't wanna have a chance of where, 3 months down the road, all of a sudden the cabinets start bleeding through. So never come across that before. I mean, it's the only second time I've painted cabinets. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with an oil-based stain blocker primer, and that, from what I've read online, should solve it. So we're gonna spray them again with the primer, this time oil-based. And then you can actually come back with an oil-based on top of that, or you can come back with the latex, and we're gonna just come back on a latex 2 coats. And so everything will have 4 coats, and that should do it. So anyway, we'll get at her. So here's what we're putting on. Key thing is right here, oil base. And then it basically says you can go with any top coat. So that's what we're going with. Still a little dark in here, but you can see the tannins or stain is definitely out of the wood. So oil-based primer did it. This is just with the Extreme Bond primer and then the oil-based primer over the top. See the little streaks in there where I got this spray, but it'll settle in once you get once we get 2 coats on there, it'll fill that in, look nice. Here we are with the tape off. These are all painted. Well, almost all the tape. All the lights are off in here, so it's hard to see because we took them all down. So they had the ceilings scraped. Few touch-ups, we got to caulk a little bit, but looking pretty good for 2 coats and 2 coats of primer. So a couple touch-ups, a couple caulking a little area, and these are done. All right, so we're over here, we're getting ready for the final coat to put on, and this is what you kind of want to do in between coats. The Emerald Sherwin-Williams is pretty self-leveling, but I'm gonna try to get the right angle here. If you can see right here, I've got like an area where that bump has, where the paint didn't settle, I either sprayed too much or I dripped. And so you want to, in between coats, you want to kind of check that. You also want to look in here, just kind of give them all a once over and see if you see any kind of dripped or edges here. I had one, which one was it here? I think it was on this one here. Had a little raised spot, so I just kind of knocked it out. So you just want to go over it. I've got 220 grit sandpaper. I've got it wrapped in a sponge, and you're literally just going to go over it. I usually pick these up so they're not getting on the nails, but you're just going to go back and forth lightly, especially in that area, until you get it removed. And now, if I sand that a little more, you want to make sure you kind of go with the grain, even though you're kind of hard to see. And then we'll come back with tack cloth to make sure we get all the dust off. But just kind of lightly go over every piece. Sometimes when you paint, what'll happen is the paint will pull up and raise it. You can see another one here, right here. It's got a little splatter there. Just take those out. And then, like I said, when you get done, if you have those, don't freak out. You're just gonna go back with a brush, lightly brush them, and then I'll show you the technique where you can roll it to make it look like it was spray painted. And that's it. Last one, ready to go, and then we'll put them up and show it to you. A few backs. I think it's this guy, where I set them on the nails.
And he's got, as you can see, he's got 4 nail marks on there. I'll go back, sand those, and then I'll paint them on with a brush, stroke it on, and then I'll use a little roller to take them out, and it'll look like it was sprayed. But it's the back. I can't remember. I think it's a drawer, so it's really not, probably even, might not even need to do it because you won't ever see it. But that's something else. If it happens on one of these big doors, it can be handled. You get a scratch down the road, it can be handled. So anyway, don't freak out about it. But that's kind of what we're doing. We're just sanding with 220 and then coming back with tack cloth to pick up any of the little dust.
So here's a quick look. Okay, kitchen's somewhat cleaned up, but like I said, we're in the process. We got most of the cabinet, last coat, sorry. Cabinets are all finished up, and now we're just getting ready to put them back on. Here's the final product of the cabinets that were all painted. They're gonna put the pulls on them, and then they will be all done, but turned out nice. There's the finished mantle, and there's the finished ledges.